Fleming had some really interesting people in his social circles, didn't he? I mean, again, when we go back to the book, and you detail this in great detail in the book, tell us about some of those characters. I mean, tell us about Ian, give us a flavour of Ian Fleming's work.
Well, Ian Fleming, despite writing what could be described as sort of staunch British chap of the colonial British Empire, Fleming was very future-minded, and I think that's partly because he straddled two world wars where things became in focus, and sometimes things didn't matter, but also the villainy of the world and the bigotry of the world became into focus. Fleming has often been said, are the books homophobic? Was Fleming homophobic? And I went, well, if they are, and if he was, that's because the 50s were homophobic. And actually, Ian Fleming wasn't homophobic at all. That's silly. Him and his wife were very, what I'd say, progressive. A phrase I used, they were adventurous. They were sexually adventurous. They had very full...
A great wide circle of friends here in London in the 50s.
And in Jamaica. And when you looked at who they were, it was people like Stephen Spender, Cecil Beaton, Noel Coward. They were all slightly on the wings of Fleming's life, and then ultimately Fleming's Bond work. But Anne Fleming, she wouldn't always go to Jamaica, so she'd sit and she'd have a great social life with all the queers and the gays. There's many stories of her holding sort of society parties, and there's two men upstairs and they're on the same bench. And oh, thank God, at least someone's having fun. She didn't care. And she'd be having dinner with Francis Bacon, and he's watching his watch because he's organised some trade with his a rent boy or some sailor he's going to meet at Trocadero. And she said, for God's sake, go and have a good time, and you might be back for coffee. So they were very open, I think, because they had a wider world vision, flanked by that wartime. It puts things in focus. Suddenly we don't have to be bigoted to enjoy life because we don't know if tomorrow we'll have a life.
Well, it was at this desk in Jamaica that Fleming sat down to write the spy novel to end all spy novels, was how he described it, Casino Royale, published by Jonathan Kay, 1953. I want to ask you about the first person that you bring into your book, Mark, is William Plomer. Now, set this character up for us, please, first, because this is a very influential person on Ian Fleming's writing and on Ian Fleming's outlook.
Yeah, so William Plomer was born in South Africa. He had a lot of South African links, and his family were out. I think they had a store out there for a while. And this was during the 1920s, and apartheid and all of that grossness was bubbling and was probably already there. And he was a writer, and William Plomer was quite an accomplished literary figure himself. He was an essayist, he would be a reviewer, he'd write poetry, fiction, non-fiction. He wrote in the 20s a book, Sado, which was looking at interracial infatuation. It wasn't a full-on romance. And that was produced by the Hogarth Press, who were tied to Virginia Woolf and her setup. So he was quite a bohemian in the 20s and 30s. And then by the Second World War, he got enrolled in the Naval Intelligence, which basically his job was to help be part of a team collating the weekly intelligence reports. What have we learned about overseas and all these missions and parts of the world, because we need to have reports. And another person working on those reports was Ian Fleming. So they were kind of under the same auspices under Admiral Godfrey, I believe it was, and they would do this. And Plomer, he had a little bit of it. In 1943, he ended up propositioning the wrong sailor at Paddington Station. I don't think there's such a thing as the wrong sailor, but anyway, he did get, I don't know whether it was the sailor was a little edgy and panicked, but it ended up going to the police and authorities, and suddenly William Plomer, who'd had his 20s and 30s, he had quite a good queer life. He would travel through Berlin, the Weimar Republic Berlin, he would bump into Christopher Isherwood and hang out with him, and all of those sort of interesting bohemian Berlin gays. But by 1943, I think he was also a little older. It's almost like his wings got clipped. He lost his gay confidence slightly. But in 1943, when he had that sort of Paddington Sailor incident, it was very clear to Admiral Godfrey and Fleming that we can't lose him. So Fleming and a couple of others collectively got him off the rap. So that, I never say that gave Plomer a little bit, he felt a bit obliged and indebted to Fleming. But later on, Plomer becomes a publishing editor at Jonathan Kay Publishers in London in 1952, 53, or 52. He's been given the manuscript, that's his job to be given the manuscript, to kind of nurture Fleming, and this, Fleming wants to do this, like you say, spy story to end all spy stories.
So he's got Casino Royale, he's got the first draft of Casino Royale, he's talking to Fleming.
Yeah.
What do you think his greatest contribution was to the world of James Bond?
Longevity. Plomer saw the potential of it. I think.
You mean saw it as a series?
Well, the publishing editor has many roles. It's yes, we want to get the book as brilliant and as marketable and as and make as much money from it. But it's also a pastoral role. And Fleming, it's because of the time as well. But Fleming was a big letter writer. There's many collections of his letters, and so Plomer and Fleming would write back and forth to each other. It's almost like a correspondence course of Fleming in Jamaica here and William Plomer in his house that he bought with his partner in the 40s, which again is. Oh, that's a very visible relationship. He was ahead of the curve there. But he saw the longevity of Bond, and whilst he saw this makes a really good little sort of novella action thriller, he thought of doing a second one. And then he became, and Fleming was, I don't think I've got another one in me. And Plomer said, yes, you have. Pull your finger out. So they kind of massaged each other's egos, but with the eye on momentum. And that's what William Plomer gave. William Plomer was the first to really encourage Fleming to make Casino Royale, the first novel, a valid product, but also do another one. And when we see at the end of every James Bond film, James Bond will return, that's because William Plomer saw the scope and potential of that. And I think by Moonraker, he was saying, this would make a good film.
Which was the third book.
Yeah, the third book. He turns around and says, this would make a really good film. And it did, but many years later.